I am going to start us off today with some Bible nerd extra credit that you can look forward to. I don't know how aware all of you are, but there is a little bit of a controversy about translations. And one of the controversies goes that the King James version of the Bible is the most accurate version of the Bible, and anybody that reads any other version is not even able to be full of the Holy Spirit, I guess. One of the verses that is at the center of that controversy is Mark 9:29, and it actually reads differently in the King James. The King James version actually tells you more things to do, and all the modern versions are missing something from that passage.
So the verse that Ryan is referring to says, and this is after a boy with an unclean spirit is healed only by Jesus because the disciples could not do it. So this boy had been completely, overcome by this demon since childhood. It would basically throw him to the ground, literally try to kill him, throw him into water, throw him into fire. It's one of these one of these books refers to him as being mute because of it. But anyway, this demon's real bad. So Jesus finally removes the demon, and the disciples are all like, well, why couldn't we do that? What's so special about what you did? And Jesus responds with verse 29 says, this kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer.
Period.
Yep.
Scandal.
And then, side note.
Scandal.
Some manuscripts add the words and fasting.
That manuscript would be the King James version. That's actually not. That's kind of an oversimplification, but that is one of the things that people will use to say if you're reading a Bible other than the King James, which is a translation, by the way, then you're being misled. So at the heart of this, and this is just the Bible nerd extra credit, we haven't even gotten into the actual episode yet. The King James version of the Bible was written in 1611 by King James. Actually, King James was not even a Christian. He just thought it would be helpful for people to have the Bible in English because at that time it wasn't available. And so he had a bunch of his people put together this translation. Because it was written in 1611, they actually did not have access to things that we have access to today. So today, probably the most reliable manuscripts that we have are actually the Dead Sea Scrolls that were discovered in the 1950s. So King James obviously did not have access to those. And so basically, the new translations of the Bible, they have 400 years of scholarship, 500 years of scholarship that King James did not have. So they have more things to compare against. And so they look at the manuscripts and they take out the word fasting. That does not mean that they don't believe in fasting. It just means they believe that fasting is not actually what Jesus said. It doesn't mean that we don't believe in that. We do. We do believe that it actually is a powerful spiritual discipline that we should all be doing. It's just that those editors and those researchers that were working on those original manuscripts felt like the modern translations should actually reflect the manuscripts that we have. So probably don't get in Bible translation fights. It's kind of a waste of time. If you are reading the Bible in English, you're reading something that has been translated, period. So one is not necessarily better than the other, but if you've ever been wondering what's at the heart of that controversy, Mark 9:29 is one of those things.
So whenever we're looking through the Gospels, I like to try to look for consistent stories across the different Gospels that we're reading for the day, to maybe just look for common patterns or things that might be slightly different between the different Gospels. But today, the ones that I did notice, we had already talked a little bit about Jesus healing the boy with the demon. There are some different versions of this story throughout each one. We also see the Transfiguration, and then Jesus does begin talking a little bit more about his death and resurrection again, which we see across some of the Gospels as well today. So I know Ryan is chomping at the bit to talk about the boy with the demon again. So why don't we just start there?
The boy with the demon is an interesting story because there's actually a few interesting things about it. One, the guy goes to Jesus' disciples first and asks for his son to be cleansed of this demon. So that tells us that people assumed that the disciples had the power to do the same things that Jesus did.
Right.
And Jesus gave them that power when he sent out the disciples to witness shortly before John the Baptist was beheaded. But they are encountering some problems because they are unable to get this demon to leave. And so they come to Jesus and ask Jesus to do it. And Jesus actually, this guy's son is having seizures because of a demon. And so they bring him to Jesus, and Jesus is just like, this wicked generation, how long am I going to be with you? It doesn't seem very compassionate. But the big question has been, and continues to be, why could this man's son not be healed of this demon? And sometimes people will make the case that the disciples did not have enough faith. If the disciples would have had more faith, they would have received the blessing that God had intended. I don't love that interpretation, because if you read in Mark, this is in Mark chapter 9, the person who does not have faith is actually the man that's asking. So the man that's asking for his son to be cleansed of this demon, he does not believe. And so Jesus confronts him. If you look at verse 21, Jesus asked the father how long this has been happening to him, and he said from childhood, and it has often cast him in the fire and into water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. Does that sound like a faith-filled answer? I mean, just compare it to the other people who have been healed. Many people are like, please heal me. Please heal me. You have this woman that sneaks up behind him and touches him because she
just
knows
reaches out.
This guy is lacking faith when he's asking, and he has been lacking faith when he's asking. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. And Jesus said to him, if you can, all things are possible for you who believes. Immediately the father of the child cried out and said, I believe, help my unbelief. What is he talking about? What is the belief that we're discussing? It's not about if Jesus can heal or if Jesus can cast out demons. It's, do you believe that Jesus is who he says he is? Which is why he finally comes to a place of saying, I believe, help me. So this actually supports kind of this thread that I've been chasing. What was Jesus doing these miracles for? It was so that people would come to faith in him. And when this man comes to faith in him, then his son is healed of this demon. I think Jesus could have done it whenever he wanted to, but he actually wants this man to come to faith first.
So then we sort of bop over. Actually, I think all of the readings start with the Transfiguration, which is really interesting, I think. The Transfiguration is like this weird moment where Jesus, I don't know, he lights up like Moses did back in the day when he's like face to face with God. And out of nowhere, Moses does appear. Elijah is there. It's like, I don't know. I'm not sure what Peter and James and John are thinking outside of just, actually, it does say that they were terrified. They don't really know what to do with themselves. And I think I would relate, like, wow, we just came up here and Jesus just hanging out with Moses and Elijah. So that is pretty nuts. And out of their uncertainty of what to do, they're like, so should we start making tents for you guys? Like, I guess assuming they were just going to stay. And God just out of nowhere says, hey, this is my son. I love him. I'm well pleased with him. Listen to what he says. And just like that, they're all gone. And Jesus kind of like, I don't know, reassures them it's going to be okay. Just stand up, I'm here. So like the reasoning for this, I don't understand. It's almost like superheroes unite so we can have like a little meeting and then gone, I guess. I have no idea. Like, this story is so prominent, but what's the point? I don't get it.
Moses here would be representing the law. Elijah here would be representing the prophets. And so you could see this as Jesus is physically present with the law and the prophets. I mean, it's bigger than that. It's Moses and it is Elijah. Mm-hmm. But this is Jesus being greater than the law and the prophets, therefore fulfilling the law and the prophets. Also, if you go and look at Deuteronomy 18, this is God revealing that one day a prophet will come like Moses, and you'll be able to hear the voice of the Lord through this prophet. And from the very beginning, I mean, this is Deuteronomy. This is all the way back when God is establishing his people. the people were looking forward to when this prophet would come. And so here, this is like a fulfillment of that promise in Deuteronomy 18, because God himself says, "This is my son whom I'm pleased with. Listen to what he says," which is alluded to actually in Deuteronomy 18. So go back and read Deuteronomy 18 and see how these two passages line up. This transfiguration is very important because it is an extreme confirmation of who Jesus is. It shows his like full spiritual nature, his full power and authority. And the fact that Moses and Elijah are there with him as well, it just shows the weight of all of this. Moses and Elijah both had like mountaintop experiences where they were face to face with God. Here, Jesus is part of that mountaintop experience. You think of these disciples that are just like extremely fearful. Peter kind of wants to keep this thing going. There is this hilarious conspiracy theory that I enjoy that I don't put a lot of stock in, but I do think it's hilarious, is that Moses, Elijah, and Jesus all fasted for 40 days in the wilderness. And so some people say that is what gave them the power to all transfigure and time travel to the same spot. I do not believe that's true, but I do find it incredibly entertaining. But you think about like the confirmation that this would have been for the disciples that were there with him. Like would you have any doubt at that point? I guess, I don't know, maybe you would, because we're humans and we constantly screw up. But this would be a significant experience.
Well, and it is in verse 9 it says, as they were coming down, and Jesus said to them, "Tell no one the vision." Vision is a unique word.
Like keep it quiet. Yeah.
Yeah, but vision though, like that to me is like a hallucination versus reality.
Well, that would be the English word that's been chosen to
I
translate
suppose.
what it's, so that's not totally fair.
But either way, tell no one of this until the Son of Man is raised from the dead. So he's like, don't be going around squawking about this. What would be the reasoning for that? I don't totally get that.
Well, I mean, again, I what sticks out to me is not that he says don't tell anyone. That what sticks out to me is he says don't tell anyone until I've risen from the dead. So this is again Jesus confirming that I am going to die. I am going to rise from the dead. Like we talked yesterday about how he's becoming more pointed in his language and more clear about what's going to happen. And so why would he have told them not to tell anybody? I don't know. I think that's like one of the huge mysteries of Jesus' ministry. But I think Jesus clearly knows when is the right time for people to know things and when is not. So that's my 2 cents. I don't have a deep understanding of that particular question, but
it is, again, like you were saying, he keeps like alluding to, and I wonder if it's just like starting to make them more and more and more uncomfortable, or maybe just more comfortable with the idea that, okay, we're gonna just come to grips with the fact that you are gonna die. You know what I mean? That must have been
I think so. I think so.
A weird thing. But anyway, yeah, those were kind of the things that I noticed that were connecting across all the Gospels that we read for today. Is there anything else that stuck out to you from any of the chapters?
I don't think so. I mean, as far as your part, I guess there's a quick little thing we had to talk about is where the disciples argue about who the greatest is. And Jesus says, like, the one who serves is the one who's the most. Don't be silly. Don't be fighting about who's the greatest. That's dumb. It's
waste of time.
Very tempting, and we all fall into it, but it's not what the Lord has for us. I think outside of that, like I got to talk about some interpretation stuff, some translation stuff. Don't fall into King James only arguments. Try to understand those arguments a little bit better. Try to understand how translations work and why we have them. I know that's like not exciting to most people, but it is actually valuable when people try to tell you that the Bible was made up or you can't trust what's written down. Like, you actually can, and there's a lot of scholarship that will help support you in knowing that that is true and it is reliable. Mm-hmm. When it comes to the Transfiguration, just know that this happened. Like, Jesus did come to fulfill the law and the prophets. The guy that was there with the law, the guy that's kind of like the prophet of prophets, they were all there with Jesus, and they were enjoying being with Jesus. Jesus is greater than both of those. Jesus has fulfilled both of those. Here we just see Jesus' power and authority. I think we see a lot of Jesus' earthly ministry. We see him as a human, but in the Transfiguration, we get a chance to see him like in his full spiritual form here as God. Like, he is power and authority and might and strength. And so that is another thing that confirms he is who he says he is, and we can believe him and we can trust him and he can forgive our sin and have authority over our lives. So interesting kind of your parts, but hopefully you get something from that. We'll be back again tomorrow. We'll see you then.
Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplанyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description. We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.